The scent of old paper and freshly ground coffee was Elara Vance's personal brand of holy incense. It was the aroma of creation, of worlds spun from the delicate threads of imagination and typed into existence on the sleek, silent keyboard of her laptop. Her study, a sanctuary of organized chaos, was walled with bookshelves that bowed under the weight of literary classics and her own 23 published novels, their spines a rainbow of colors with her name embossed in elegant foil. At 42, Elara was the undisputed queen of romantic suspense, a title she wore with a quiet, bemused pride. Today, however, the words wouldn't come. The cursor on the screen blinked with a relentless, mocking rhythm. Her current work in progress, A Kiss Before the Knife, was stalled at chapter 14. The problem was the murder. Her villain, a charming but ruthless art forger, dispatched his rivals with a unique signature, a single, precise stab wound to the heart, delivered with an antique stiletto letter opener he collected. It was clever, she'd thought, elegant even. But now, as she tried to describe the fourth victim, a gallery owner found in his minimalist loft, the prose felt flat, the violence cartoonish. Sighing, she pushed away from the desk, her chair rolling soundlessly across the polished oak floor. She walked to the large bay window that overlooked her rain-slicked Seattle garden. The city was shrouded in a persistent, drizzling gray that she usually found comforting. Today, it felt oppressive. A shiver, unrelated to the chill from the glass, traced a path down her spine. It was the silence, she decided. The house was too quiet, too empty. It had been since Mark left, taking his booming laugh and his golf clubs with him, complaining that living with a woman who concocted murders for a living was emotionally draining. Her phone vibrated on the desk, shattering the silence. The screen lit up with a number she didn't recognize, a Seattle area code. Telemarketer, probably. She let it go to voicemail, but a moment later, it buzzed again, the same number. Annoyance prickled at her. She snatched it up. "Elara Vance," she said, her voice tighter than she intended. "Ms. Vance? This is Detective Miles Thorne with the Seattle Police Department." The voice was a low, resonant baritone, calm but edged with a professional gravity that immediately set her nerves on alert. "I need to ask you a few questions. Would it be possible for us to stop by your residence?" Her heart gave a single, hard thump against her ribs. "The police? What is this regarding?" A slight pause, the kind filled with the unspoken weight of bad news. "There's been an incident. A homicide. We believe you might have some relevant information." An hour later, Elara was sitting across from Detective Thorne in her living room, the steam from 2 cups of untouched tea curling between them like spectral questions. He was younger than she'd imagined from his voice, perhaps mid-30s, with the solid, capable build of a man who spent more time on his feet than behind a desk. His hair was a dark, unruly brown, and his eyes, a startling shade of hazel, held an intensity that was both disconcerting and compelling. He wasn't handsome in a conventional way, but his face was interesting, etched with a quiet intelligence. His partner, a severe-looking woman introduced as Detective Miller, stood by the fireplace, her gaze cataloging the room with a detached efficiency. "Miss Vance," Thorne began, his voice softening slightly, "I have to confess, before we begin, I'm an admirer of your work. Whispers in the Dark was particularly brilliant." The compliment, so utterly out of place, threw her. "Thank you," she managed, her confusion deepening. "But the homicide?" Thorne leaned forward, placing a tablet on the coffee table. He tapped the screen, and a crime scene photo appeared. Elara's breath hitched. It was a man, sprawled on a polished concrete floor amidst the stark, expensive furniture of a modern apartment. The blood, a shocking crimson against the monochrome palette, had pooled around his chest. "This is Arthur Finch," Thorne said, his eyes fixed on her face, watching her reaction. "He was a gallery owner, found this morning in his loft in Belltown." Elara felt the blood drain from her face. The description, a gallery owner, a minimalist loft. It was her scene, the one she'd been struggling to write. I I don't understand, she whispered, her throat dry. The cause of death was a single stab wound to the heart, Thorne continued, his voice relentlessly calm. The weapon was an item from his own collection. A 19th-century stiletto letter opener, Italian make. Elara's world tilted. The air left her lungs in a rush. She stared at the photo, at the precise, almost surgical wound. It was exactly as she had written it in her draft. Exactly. Her manuscript was private, stored only on her laptop and in a secure cloud drive. No one had read it.
How?
The word was a choked sob. How is this possible? Detective Miller spoke for the first time, her voice clipped. That's what we were hoping you could tell us, Ms. Vance. The details of this murder are unique. Too unique to be a coincidence. Elara looked from Miller's skeptical face back to Thorne's. His expression was different. There was no accusation there, only a deep, probing curiosity. He wasn't looking at her as a suspect, he was looking at her as a source. You think someone copied it? She asked, her mind reeling. We do, Thorne said, his gaze never leaving hers. And we think the killer is someone who has access to your work before it's published. Someone close to you. The days that followed were a blur of paranoia and police procedure. Her laptop was taken for analysis, her cloud drive scoured for digital footprints. She provided a list of everyone who had access to her unpublished work. Her agent, Sarah, a whirlwind of optimistic energy. Her editor, David, a meticulous man in New York who communicated mostly through terse emails. And her assistant, Liam, a sweet, earnest MFA student in his 20s who handled her social media and research. The police interviewed them all. Sarah had been horrified, David professionally concerned from a distance, and Liam had been practically tearful, offering his full cooperation. No red flags.
No obvious motives.
Detective Thorne became a constant, unsettling presence. He visited her daily, sometimes with questions, sometimes just to check in. He'd often steer the conversation back to her books, to her process. You understand the criminal mind in a way few do, Elara, he said one afternoon, using her first name with a casual intimacy that felt both jarring and natural. They were in her study, the rain pattering against the window. You get into the head of the killer. The motivation, the artistry, the satisfaction. It's not real, she protested, gesturing to the stacks of her books. It's plot. It's mechanics. I create puzzles, not profiles. But the why is what you do best, he insisted, picking up a copy of A Lethal Affection. In this one, the killer targets people who wronged her in high school. The motive was a slow-burning resentment. That's psychological insight. You're a student of human darkness. She looked at him, truly looked at him. He wasn't just a cop doing his job. He was a fan, a believer in the world she built. And he believed that her understanding of those fictional worlds was the key to unlocking this very real one. You think I can help you catch him, she stated. I know you can, he said, his conviction absolute. The killer isn't just copying you, Elara. He's communicating with you. He's a fan, too. A deranged one. He's using your blueprint to create his own masterpiece, and he wants you to see it. We just have to learn how to read his responses. The idea was terrifying, but it also ignited a cold, sharp spark within her. This was no longer a distant tragedy. It was her story, twisted and made flesh. And if this killer was using her words as a script, then perhaps her understanding of narrative was the only weapon she had. The breakthrough came a week later. Another body, a corporate lawyer, found in the sauna of his exclusive health club. The cause of death, poisoning via a rare tropical neurotoxin administered through a contaminated towel. The method was lifted directly from her third novel, Deadly Spa Day. When Thorne called to tell her, his voice was grim. He's escalating. The first was a private killing. This one was in a semi-public place. He's getting bolder. Elara, sitting at her desk with a printed copy of Deadly Spa Day open before her, felt a chilling clarity descend. He's not just copying, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. He's improving. Improving. Thorne's tone was sharp. In my book, the killer used a common household cleaner, altered. It was plausible, but not perfect. This rare neurotoxin? It's more sophisticated, more definitive. He's fixing my mistakes. He's making the plot better. The silence on the other end of the line was profound.
Jesus, torne briated. He's not just a fan.
He's a critic. The investigation became a twisted form of collaboration. Elara and Thorne spent hours together, surrounded by her books, maps of the city, and crime scene photos that were now seared into her nightmares. He brought the forensic expertise, the procedural knowledge. She brought her understanding of story, of motive, of the dark poetry of crime. She found herself looking forward to his visits, to the focused intensity he brought into her quiet house. He was a man of contradictions, a cop with the soul of a reader, rugged yet perceptive. She learned he was divorced, that he spent his free time restoring a vintage motorcycle, that he had a dry, unexpected wit that could make her laugh even in the midst of a horror. The professional boundary between them began to blur, frayed by shared obsession and the intimate nature of their task. One evening, as they pored over the list of victims, searching for a connection beyond her books, Elara had a realization. "It's not about them," she said, her finger tracing the names. Arthur Finch, the gallery owner. Ben Carter, the lawyer. "It's about me. Look at their professions." Finch was arrogant, a known womanizer. Carter was ruthless, famous for crushing small businesses in lawsuits. In my books, they were stand-ins for my ex-husband. Thorne's head snapped up. Mark. Not literally, but the archetype. The charming, selfish, emotionally unavailable man. I've killed Mark a dozen times in my fiction. She met his gaze, a horrifying thought dawning. This killer, he's not just replicating the murders. He's replicating the motivation. He's punishing these men for me. The air in the room grew cold. The killer, obsession was no longer an abstract concept. It was a personal, terrifying devotion. He saw himself as her avenger, her dark knight. Their suspicion began to narrow, focusing with a painful intensity on the people in her inner circle. Liam, her assistant, was a shy young man who blushed when she spoke to him, who knew her work better than anyone, and who had once confessed he wanted to write, just like her. Her agent, Sarah, was fiercely loyal but also fiercely ambitious, had the pressure of the industry, the constant drive for a bigger bestseller, pushed her towards something unthinkable. Even her ex-husband, Mark, was re-interviewed. He had access to her early drafts during their marriage. Had he kept them? Was this some twisted form of post-divorce harassment? The pressure mounted, a constant, suffocating weight. Elara stopped sleeping, jumping at every creak of the old house. Her writing, once her refuge, became a source of terror. Every word she typed felt like a potential death sentence for someone. One night, she woke to the sound of shattering glass from downstairs. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage of bone. Frozen in bed, she fumbled for her phone, her fingers numb with fear. She was about to call Thorne when she saw it, a shadow, moving past her slightly open bedroom door. Panic seized her. She was going to die here, in the dark, a victim in her own grim story. But then a different emotion surged up from the depths, a fierce, burning anger. This was her house, her story. She wouldn't be a passive character. Quietly, she slid out of bed, grabbing the heavy, crystal bookend from her nightstand, a gift for her first bestseller. She crept to the door, her breath held, and peered out. The hallway was empty. She could hear someone moving in her study. She inched forward, her bare feet silent on the rug. The door to her study was ajar. Through the crack, she saw a figure, dressed in black, hunched over her desk, the light from her laptop screen illuminating his hands as he typed. It was Liam. Her breath caught. He was muttering to himself, a low, frantic monologue. No, the ending is all wrong. She doesn't see it yet. He has to prove himself. He has to make her see. Liam, she said, her voice trembling. He spun around, his face a mask of shock and something else, a feverish, possessive gleam in his eyes. Elara.
I.
I was just fixing it. The ending of A Kiss Before the Knife. You got it wrong. The detective, he's not the hero. He's in the way. He took a step towards her, and in his hand, he held not a weapon, but a USB drive. I have all your drafts here.
I've been studying them.
I'm your biggest fan. I understand your work better than you do. I'm making it real, for you, so you can see the true art of it. He was insane. The adoration in his eyes was a twisted, terrifying thing. He saw himself as her collaborator, her perfect reader. The police are on their way, Liam, she lied, her grip tightening on the bookend. He smiled, a pitying, condescending smile. They don't understand the narrative. But you do, don't you, Elara? He lunged. Not at her, but for the laptop, as if to destroy the evidence of his intrusion. In that moment, Elara didn't think. She acted. She swung the bookend. It connected with his shoulder with a sickening thud. He cried out, stumbling back, and she brought it down again, this time on his wrist, and he dropped the USB drive with a clatter. She ran, screaming, down the stairs and out the front door, into the cold, wet night, just as a car screeched to a halt at the curb. Detective Thorne leaped out, his service weapon drawn, his face a mask of frantic concern. Elara. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing, pointing back at the house. It's Liam. It was Liam. The aftermath was a media circus. Novelist's assistant is copycat killer, the headline screamed. Liam, it turned out, had been a deeply troubled young man with a history of obsessive behavior. He had meticulously planned the murders, seeing himself as the curator of Elara's dark vision, the one who could bring her beautiful, deadly fantasies to life. The USB drive contained not only her drafts but a detailed journal of his actions, a deranged commentary on her work. The case was closed. The city breathed a sigh of relief. But for Elara, the resolution felt hollow. The horror was over, but the fear had taken root deep inside her. She moved out of the house, renting a sterile, secure apartment with a view of the Sound. She couldn't write. The blank page was no longer a canvas. It was a void, threatening to swallow her whole. Thorne checked on her regularly. He brought her food, made her tea, and simply sat with her in the silence. He was her anchor in the churning sea of her anxiety. He's gone, Elara, Thorne said one evening, watching the sunset paint the water in hues of orange and violet. He can't hurt you anymore. It's not him I'm afraid of, she whispered, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. It's the words. It's the part of me that created those worlds. What if that darkness is in me? What if I inspired him? Thorne moved to sit beside her on the sofa. He took her hand, his grip warm and solid. The darkness wasn't in your words, Elara. It was in him. You don't create monsters. You just hold up a mirror to the ones that already exist. Your gift is seeing the light that fights the dark. That's the real story in all your books. The love that survives the terror. That's what I've always read them for. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over onto her cheeks.
He saw it.
He saw the heart of her work, the hope she always tried to weave through the suspense. He saw her. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. He kissed her, a soft, lingering kiss that tasted of promise and understanding. It was a kiss that held no shadows, no secrets, only the simple, profound truth of a connection forged in the darkest of fires. A year later, the launch party for The Crimson Quill was in full swing at a bustling downtown bookstore. The room was filled with the happy murmur of readers, the clinking of wine glasses, and the scent of new books. Elara, standing at a podium, looked out at the crowd, her heart full. She was different now. There were new lines around her eyes, traces of the fear she had conquered, but her smile was genuine, her posture confident. She wore a simple crimson dress, a nod to the title, and on her finger, a simple, elegant band, a promise from Miles. She found him in the crowd, leaning against a bookshelf, watching her with that same quiet, intense admiration. He wasn't in uniform, he was off duty, just a man supporting the woman he loved. He winked at her, and a warm flush spread through her. "Thank you all for coming," Elara began, her voice clear and strong. "This book was the hardest I've ever written. For a long time, I thought I might never write again. I was afraid of the power of stories, of the shadows they can cast." She paused, her gaze meeting Miles's across the room. "But I was reminded that stories are also our greatest source of light. They help us understand the world, they help us fight our demons, and sometimes," she smiled, a true, radiant smile, "they lead us to the people who help us heal." She held up a copy of The Crimson Quill. The cover was stark and beautiful, a single, white quill pen, its tip dipped in a drop of deep, crimson ink. "This is a story about stories," she said. "About the lies we tell, and the truths we discover. And most of all, it's about finding the courage to write your own ending." Later, as the crowd thinned, Miles came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her close. He nuzzled her neck, his breath warm against her skin. "It's a masterpiece," he murmured. "But you left out the best part."
Oh,
"And what's that?" she asked, leaning back into his solid strength. "The detective," he said, turning her to face him. His hazel eyes were soft, full of a love that still took her breath away. "You gave him all the best lines, but you failed to mention just how madly in love he was with the brilliant, brave novelist from the very beginning." Elara laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. "That," she said, reaching up to kiss him, "is a story for the next book." And for the first time in a long time, she couldn't wait to start writing.